The morning sun cut through the dusty windows of the Helena land office like a judge's gavel, illuminating particles of Montana dirt that had traveled 2,000 miles from the Eastern Territories. April 1882. The air smelled of wood polish, old paper, and the desperate dreams of men who had nothing left to lose. Nathan Blackwood stood before the clerk's desk, his shadow consuming half the room. 6 feet 8 inches of hard labor and harder memories. His hands, calloused from 3 years of timber work in the northern forests, rested on the counter edge, dwarfing the polished oak beneath them. The scar that ran from his collarbone to his jaw caught the light, a permanent reminder of violence he had tried to bury in the wilderness. The clerk, a thin man named Pritchard, who wore spectacles thicker than the law books stacked behind him, looked up and immediately looked back down. Men like Nathan made bureaucrats nervous. Men that size, with eyes that dark, with silence that deep. Section 12, Township 10 North, Range 4 West. Nathan's voice rumbled like distant thunder. He placed a leather pouch on the counter. The coins inside clinked with finality. 160 acres under the Homestead Act, $18 filing fee. Pritchard counted the coins twice. Silver dollars, half dollars, quarters. Each one represented a day of back-breaking work. 3 years of Nathan's life reduced to $18 and the promise of land no one else wanted. That parcel borders Henderson Creek. Pritchard's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Cole Henderson won't like this. Nathan said nothing. He had learned long ago that silence carried more weight than threats. The clerk's pen scratched across the claim form. Legal words in beautiful script, words that meant Nathan Blackwood, age 30, formerly of nowhere, and nothing, now owns something. Or would in 5 years if he could prove up the claim. 5 years of continuous residence. 5 years of cultivation. 5 years of making something grow in soil that had known only wild grass and wind. You understand the requirements. Pritchard pushed the paper forward. Dwelling erected within 6 months, 14 by 14 minimum. 5 acres under cultivation by year's end. Continuous residence for 5 years. I understand. And you understand that water rights in Montana Territory follow the doctrine of prior appropriation. First in time, first in right. Nathan's jaw tightened. The creek runs through Section 12. Federal survey says it's mine. Federal survey says a lot of things. Pritchard removed his spectacles, wiped them with a handkerchief that had seen better days. But Henderson's family has been drawing from that creek since '76. Court might see things different than the surveyor. Then Court and I will have a conversation. Nathan signed the form. His signature, practiced but still awkward, took up 3 times the space of a normal man's. The pen looked like a child's toy in his grip. Outside, Helena stretched across the valley like a gambler's last bet. Wood buildings, half of them unpainted. Dirt streets that turned to rivers when it rained and dust bowls when it didn't. The Rocky Mountains rose behind the town like the walls of a prison Nathan had spent 10 years trying to escape. He led his horse, a sturdy roan named Justice, south along the creek road. The claim lay 3 miles from town, far enough for privacy, close enough to fetch a doctor or a sheriff if either became necessary. Though in Nathan's experience, both usually arrived too late to matter. The land revealed itself slowly, ponderosa pines climbing the northern slope. The creek running clear and cold from snowmelt cutting through the valley floor. South-facing exposure for crops. Natural windbreak from the north storms that would come howling down from Canada in December. Good timber for building. Good grass for livestock. Good soil if a man was willing to break his back turning it. Nathan dismounted at the southeast corner and pulled the first boundary marker from his saddlebag. Oak 6 feet tall, thick as a man's thigh. He had cut and shaped 12 of them during the winter, working by lamplight in a logging camp bunkhouse, while other men played cards and told lies about women. He drove the stake deep with a sledgehammer that weighed 20 pounds and felt like a toy in his hands. The sound echoed across the empty valley. His valley now, his land, his chance. The sun climbed higher. Nathan worked methodically, pacing off the boundaries with surveyor's precision he had taught himself from library books in the camps. 4 stakes to a side, 12 stakes total. Each one sunk 3 feet into Montana earth. Each one a promise. Each one a prayer to a god. Nathan wasn't sure listen to men like him anymore. He was driving the 8th stake when he heard the horses. 4 riders came from the west following the creek. They moved with the casual authority of men who had never been told no. The leader sat a Palomino gelding too fine for ranch work, Cole Henderson. Nathan had never met the man, but he knew the type. Second-generation Montana. Father had been first to claim water rights. Son assumed that meant he owned everything the water touched. Henderson pulled up 20 feet away, his 3 hands fanned out in a loose semicircle. Not quite threatening, not quite friendly. The universal language of men testing boundaries. That's Henderson Creek you're staking. Cole was 40, running to fat, but still strong. His face had the ruddy complexion of a man who drank too much and slept too little. Creek feeds my cattle. You got no right blocking my water access. Nathan straightened slowly. The sledgehammer hung from his right hand like an afterthought. He met Henderson's eyes and said nothing. I'm talking to you, boy. Nathan almost smiled at that. He had not been a boss for a very long time. He set the hammer down with deliberate care. When he stood to his full height, Henderson's horse sidled nervously. Creek runs through Section 12. Federal survey says it's mine. Federal survey don't mean nothing out here. Henderson leaned forward in his saddle. Only thing that matters is who can hold it. I can hold it. The words fell like stones into still water. One of Henderson's hands, a kid barely 20 with a Colt he probably didn't know how to use, let his hand drift toward his belt. Nathan tracked the movement without appearing to look. Old instincts he had tried to drown in timber work in isolation. You know who I am, Henderson's voice rose. My father was drawing water from this creek when you were still sucking your mama's tit. That gives me rights. Real rights. Not some paper from a government clerk who wouldn't last 3 days out here. Nathan picked up his hammer, turned back to the stake, raised the sledge and brought it down with 20 years of violence compressed into one perfect swing. The stake sank 6 inches. The sound cracked across the valley like a rifle shot. He raised the hammer again. You're making a mistake, Blackwood. Henderson spat the name like a curse. Someone in town had been talking. Someone always talked. Big mistake. Nathan brought the hammer down again. Stake sank another 6 inches. Henderson wheeled his horse, motioning to his men. They rode back the way they had come, raising dust that hung in the still air long after the hoofbeats faded. Nathan drove the stake home. Then he sat on the ground back against the marker and let his hands shake. They always shook after confrontation. They had shaken for 10 years, ever since Fort Collins. Ever since he learned what his hands could do when rage replaced thought. The afternoon sun slanted long across his valley. His land, his second chance, if he could hold it. 6 weeks later, Nathan returned to Helena for supplies. The general store smelled of coffee, tobacco, and leather. He was selecting nails when he overheard the conversation at the counter. Sisters of Mercy closing the mission. The storekeeper shook his head. Bishop recalled them all to Denver. Orphans going to Catholic homes back east. Except the older ones. Nobody wants them at that age. What about Sister Catherine? A woman's voice concerned. She's been here 4 years. This is her home. Orders are orders. She's to report to the mother house in Philadelphia. Though where she'll get train fare, Lord knows. Church won't pay it. Nathan turned, saw a figure in black near the door. Small, perhaps 5 feet tall. The traditional habit of the Sisters of Mercy, but threadbare, patched at the elbows. A face pale from too many Montana winters, framed by the white band of her coif. She was looking at fabric, her fingers gentle on the cloth, and Nathan recognized the touch of someone who could not afford to buy. Sister Mary Catherine. He had seen her around town, always with orphan children, always teaching someone to read, always moving with quiet purpose. Irish accent when she spoke. Maybe 24, 25 years old. Young to have taken final vows, but the church recruited early from the immigrant ships. She looked up, met his eyes for a brief moment, then looked away. But Nathan had seen something there, not fear, resignation maybe, the look of someone whose options had run out. He made his decision in the space of a heartbeat. Sister, his voice startled her. Might I have a word? She approached cautiously, this tiny woman in black, keeping proper distance. Up close, he could see the intelligence in her gray eyes, the calluses on her hands from washing other people's children. A faint scar on her temple, mostly hidden by the habit. Mr. Blackwood, her voice was soft but clear. Irish lilt, educated despite the accent. I know who you are. The whole town does. I have a proposition. Her eyebrows rose slightly. I'm a bride of Christ, sir. I don't entertain propositions from men. Not that kind. Nathan kept his voice low. I have a homestead claim. Need to prove up in 5 years. The Homestead Act allows a man to bring a wife, speeds the process, looks better to the land office. I'm not a wife to be had, but you're a woman who needs somewhere to go, and I'm a man who needs someone educated. I can't read past a 10-year-old level. You've been teaching orphans for 4 years. Seems like we might help each other. She studied him with those sharp gray eyes. You're proposing marriage. I'm proposing survival. For both of us. You'd have your own room, your own space. No expectations beyond helping prove the claim. Teaching me to read. Building something that matters. I've taken vows. Have you taken final vows or just first profession? She hesitated. First profession. 4 years ago, I was to take final vows next year, but the mission closing, she trailed off. So you're not permanently bound. You could leave the order if you chose. Choosing to leave and being forced to leave are different things, Mr. Blackwood. Are they? Seems to me the church is forcing you east to a mother house you've never seen. I'm offering you a choice. Stay in Montana, have land, have purpose, on your own terms. And what do you wed? Nathan considered lying, considered half-truths, settled on honesty. I get someone who can teach me, who can help run a homestead, who can look at me without fear in her eyes because you've spent 4 years with orphans and nothing scares you anymore. And maybe if God's willing, I get to build something good, something that balances the scales of what I've done. What have you done? Things I can't undo, things I'm trying to make right. She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still touching the fabric she couldn't afford. Finally, she spoke. I would need time to pray, to seek guidance. You have until Sunday. That's when the sisters leave for Denver. And if I say yes, then you marry me Sunday morning. We ride to the homestead Sunday afternoon, and we start building something neither of us thought we'd ever have, which is a second chance. She looked at him for a long moment, this giant of a man offering rescue to a woman who had spent her adult life rescuing others. Then she nodded once. I'll pray on it. That Sunday morning, Sister Mary Catherine stood outside the small Catholic church in her traveling clothes. Not the habit, not anymore. A simple gray dress, modest and worn, borrowed from one of the townswomen. Her hair, released from the coif for the first time in 4 years, hung in a dark braid down her back. She looked younger without the habit, more vulnerable, more human. Nathan waited by the church steps dressed in his only good shirt. Reverend Gray stood ready with his Bible. The Protestant minister, not the Catholic priest. That detail mattered to Catherine. Leaving the church was one thing. Desecrating it was another. Marshal James Caldwell was there leaning against the wall, watching with those sharp lawman eyes. A few townspeople had gathered curious about the spectacle. A nun marrying a homesteader. It was the kind of story that would be told in saloons for years. Catherine walked toward Nathan with measured steps, and he could see the conflict in every movement. This was apostasy in the church's eyes. This was abandoning a calling. But it was also survival. She stopped 3 feet from him, and he removed his hat. Miss, he hesitated. What's your given name, your family name? Catherine O'Brien, born in County Cork, orphaned at 16, took vows at 20. Catherine O'Brien. He tried the name. It felt more real than Sister Mary Catherine. More like a woman and less like an institution. Are you certain? No. Her voice was steady despite the admission. But certainty is a luxury I can't afford. So I'm choosing faith instead. Faith that this is where God is leading me, even if it doesn't look like any path I imagined. Reverend Gray stepped forward, Bible in hand. We'll keep this brief. Miss O'Brien, Mr. Blackwood, you understand the commitment you're making. Yes, Catherine said. I do, Nathan added. Then let us begin. The ceremony took 5 minutes. No flourishes, no poetry. Just the bare legal words that bound two strangers together in the eyes of God in the territory of Montana. Do you, Nathan Blackwood, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you, Catherine O'Brien, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Her voice came out clear and certain, surprising even herself. I do. Then by the power vested in me by the territory of Montana, I pronounce you husband and wife. No kiss. Catherine had been clear about that. This was legal necessity, not romance. They stood 3 feet apart, married strangers united by desperation and mutual need. The small crowd applauded uncertainly. Someone whispered loud enough to carry, "She won't last 3 months out there." Then Marshall Caldwell stepped forward and Nathan's stomach tightened. "Congratulations, Blackwood." James's voice carried no warmth. He looked at Catherine and something shifted in his expression. "Ma'am, did anyone explain to you about your husband, Marshall?" Nathan's voice held warning. "Did they tell you he's killed? Did they tell you about Fort Collins?" The crowd went silent. Catherine's face paled, but she did not step back. "What happened at Fort Collins?" Her voice remained steady despite everything. 10 years ago, James said, his eyes locked on Nathan. "Your husband and I were part of a territorial militia. We attacked what we were told was a hostile Cheyenne camp. It wasn't. It was families, elders, children, and we killed them. Every last one." Nathan's hands clenched into fists. The crowd drew back slightly. "I deserted that night," James continued. "Couldn't live with what we'd done. Your husband there, he ran too. Been running ever since. Hiding in timber camps, building cabins in the middle of nowhere, and now marrying women who don't know what they're getting into." Catherine looked at Nathan, really looked at him for the first time. He met her gaze and did not look away, though it cost him. "Is it true?" "Yes." One word, no excuse, no explanation. Just the truth, flat and heavy as a tombstone. "Did you know they were families?" "No, not until it was too late." "But you killed them anyway." "Yes." She nodded slowly, processing information that should have sent her running. But her bag was at her feet. Her vows were broken. Her options were behind her, an ocean away. She picked up her small traveling bag, took one step toward Nathan, then another. "Whatever he was," she said to Marshall Caldwell, her voice ringing clear across the churchyard, "he's my husband now, and I've spent 4 years teaching children that redemption is possible for anyone who seeks it. I'd be a hypocrite to believe otherwise." James's expression flickered. Surprise, maybe, or respect. Hard to tell. "Your choice, ma'am. Pray you don't regret it." He turned and walked away, his boots loud on the packed earth. The crowd dispersed, hungry for breakfast and gossip in equal measure. Reverend Gray blessed them quietly and left. Nathan and Catherine stood alone in the morning sun, bound by law, if not yet by anything else. "I have a wagon," Nathan said finally. "The ranch is an hour's ride." She nodded. He reached for her bag. His hand brushed hers as he took it, and she flinched slightly. The bag weighed almost nothing in his grip. Everything she owned in the world, and it weighed less than the sledgehammer he had used to drive boundary stakes. He led her to the wagon, lifted her up onto the seat with both hands around her waist. She was so light he barely felt her weight. She settled onto the bench, arranging her skirts, and he climbed up beside her own. The wagon tilted toward his side. They left Helena in silence, following the creek road south. The town fell away behind them. Ahead, the mountains rose like judgment. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning chill. 20 minutes passed before either of them spoke. "The marshal," Catherine said quietly. "He was trying to protect me. From you." "Yes." "Does he have reason to?" Nathan considered lying, considered half-truths, settled on honesty because she deserved at least that much. "I don't know. I've spent 10 years trying to be a different man than I was at Fort Collins, trying to build instead of destroy. But these hands," he looked down at his hands on the reins, hands that had killed, hands that had built. Same hands. They're the same hands. "Are they? I don't know." More silence. The wagon creaked. The horses plodded. A hawk circled overhead, riding thermals up from the valley floor. "I broke my vows this morning." Catherine's voice was barely audible. "Poverty, chastity, obedience, all of them gone in 5 minutes of ceremony." Nathan's jaw tightened. 4 years I spent teaching children that God has a plan, that suffering has meaning, that sacrifice brings grace. She turned to look at him, and he was struck by the complexity in her eyes. Guilt, yes, but also something harder. And then the bishop closes our mission with a telegram. No warning, no consideration for the children or the sisters who've built lives here. Just orders. Obedience. That why you agreed to marry me? I agreed because staying in Montana seemed holier than returning to Philadelphia to be forgotten in a mother house full of women who never wanted to be nuns in the first place. I agreed because teaching you to read seems more Christian than filing papers in a chancery office. I agreed because she couldn't finish. Because sometimes survival is the most faithful thing we can do. She looked at him for a long moment. Yes. The ranch appeared around a bend in the creek. Catherine leaned forward, and Nathan tried to see it through her eyes. The cabin raw and new logs still weeping sap. The barn half finished. The corral empty of livestock. The land raw and wild and beautiful in a way that could kill you if you weren't careful. It's not a convent, he said. Thank God for that. He pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the cabin, set the brake, climbed down and walked around to help her. She was already standing on the running board preparing to jump. He held up his hands and she hesitated, then let him lift her down. For a moment, his hands spanned her waist completely. He could feel her heartbeat against his palms. She was looking up at him and he was looking down at her, and the distance between them was vast, in more ways than height. He set her down gently and stepped back. This way. The cabin smelled of fresh pine and wood smoke. He had left a fire banked in the hearth that morning, and it still radiated warmth. The main room opened before them, large and sparse. Table, chairs, the enormous bed against the far wall. Catherine's eyes went to the bed, then quickly away. Your room is here? Nathan opened a door he had hung just last week. I built it thinking, well, I built it. She stepped through the doorway and stopped. The room was small but perfectly proportioned for her size. The bed with its carefully sewn quilt. The writing desk at exactly the right height. A small crucifix on the wall carved from pine. The dresser with a mirror hung at her eye level instead of his. The window with real glass facing east to catch the morning sun. And on the windowsill a vase filled with wild roses from the creek. She set her bag down slowly, walked to the crucifix, touched it with gentle fingers, turned to look at the flowers. You made this, for me, before you'd even asked me to marry you. I made it hoping. That's different. She was crying, silently, tears streaming down her face. She wiped at them with the back of her hand, embarrassed. I'm sorry, I don't. In the convent, we were taught to be grateful for nothing, to want for nothing, to need nothing but them. She gestured around the room, but this. Well, Nathan stood in the doorway, too large to enter the small room without overwhelming it. I wanted you to have something that was yours, a space where you didn't have to be anything but yourself. She nodded, unable to speak. Supper's at 6, he said finally. Venison stew. There's a basin and pitcher for washing. Outhouse is behind the cabin, 30 paces straight back. I'll be in the barn if you need anything. He pulled the door closed and left her there, giving her privacy she suspected she had not had since taking her first vows 4 years ago. In the barn, he mucked non-existent stalls and organized tools that were already organized and tried not to think about the woman in his house, his wife. The word felt foreign, dangerous, like claiming something he had no right to claim. The sun set. Nathan washed at the pump, scrubbing construction grime from his hands and face, changed into a clean shirt, walked back to the cabin with the careful tread of a man approaching a wild animal that might bolt. Catherine was in the main room, standing at the stove. She had removed her traveling bonnet, and her dark hair caught the lamplight. She was stirring the pot with a wooden spoon that looked comically large in her small hand. I thought I might help, she said without turning around. Though I warn you, convent cooking is institutional. I'm not sure I remember how to make food taste like anything. Can't be worse than mine. They ate at the table he had built, sitting across from each other, with 3 feet of pine between them. The stew was bland but edible. Catherine picked at hers, her appetite gone, or maybe just overwhelmed by everything that had happened in the past 12 hours. When the meal was done, Nathan washed the dishes while Catherine dried. They worked in silence, finding a rhythm, his hands huge and rough, her hands small and delicate, both scarred in different ways. It was nearly 9 when the knock came. Sharp, authoritative, the kind of knock that said law or trouble, and often both. Nathan opened the door to find Marshall Caldwell standing in the darkness, hat pulled low, his expression unreadable. "Evening, Blackwood?" "Marshall, mind if I come in?" "I mind." James's eyes flicked past Nathan to where Catherine stood in the lamplight, still wearing her simple gray dress, looking more like a school teacher than a former nun. "Just wanted to check in. New wife first night. Town likes to make sure everyone's settling and proper." "She's fine. Rather hear that from her if you don't mind." Nathan stepped aside. James entered, removed his hat, nodded to Catherine. "Mrs. Blackwood, hope you're settling in all right." "I am, thank you, Marshall." "Husband treating you well?" "Yes." "You've got your own room, your own space?" "I do." James looked around the cabin, his lawman's eyes cataloging everything: the size disparity, the separate bedroom door, the tension that vibrated in the air like a plucked string. "Ma'am, I want you to know something. If you ever feel unsafe here, my door is open. Day or night, you understand?" "I understand, Marshall, but I'm quite all right." "See that you stay that way." He turned back to Nathan and the temperature in the room dropped. "I meant what I said at the church. Fort Collins doesn't go away just because you built a cabin and married a nun." "Former nun," Catherine corrected quietly. "Former nun," James acknowledged. He looked back at Nathan. "That blood is still on our hands." "I know. Do you? Because I see you out here playing homesteader, and I wonder if you've forgotten what we are, what we did." "I've forgotten nothing." "Then remember this." James stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I know who you were. I know what you're capable of when you lose control. And if I hear that woman screaming, if I see one bruise, one sign that you've hurt her, I will put you in the ground. Badge or no badge, friend or no friend. We clear?" "We're clear." James held his gaze for another long moment, then nodded, put his hat back on, tipped it to Catherine. "Ma'am, you have a good evening." He left, his footsteps receding into darkness. Nathan closed the door and stood with his back to it, breathing hard. "He's wrong about you." Catherine's voice was quiet but firm. "He's right about me, about what I was, but not about what you are." Nathan turned to look at her. She stood in the lamplight, Mullen straight-backed and stronger than she looked. "You don't know what I am. We've known each other one day. I know you built me a room with a crucifix on the wall. I know you're gentle with dishes despite hands that could crush them. I know you're more afraid of hurting me than I am of being hurt." She paused. "And I know we're both running from something. Maybe that's enough for now." It should not have been enough, but it was. That night, Catherine retired to her small room, and Nathan to his large bed, and the cabin settled around them with the creaks and sighs of new wood finding its place. Nathan lay awake listening to the night sounds: wind in the pines, creak over stones, and very faintly through the thin wall between rooms, the sound of Catherine praying in Latin. The old prayers, the ones she had said 1,000 times. He wanted to go to her, wanted to tell her it was all right to grieve what she had lost, wanted to promise that everything would be all right. But he had learned long ago that his promises meant nothing against the weight of the past. So he lay in the darkness and listened and wondered if two broken people could build something whole, or if brokenness was all they would ever know. The first week passed in the careful dance of strangers learning to share space. Nathan rose before dawn, as he always had, moving through the darkness with practiced silence. He would find Catherine already awake, dressed in the same gray dress she had worn every day, boiling water for coffee in the pre-dawn chill. They spoke little. Words felt dangerous, unnecessary. Instead, they moved around each other like planets in separate orbits, close but never touching. Nathan taught her the land through action rather than explanation. How to read the sky for weather, watching the mare's tails that meant rain in 24 hours. How to recognize the tracks that appeared in the soft earth near the creek each morning. Elk, deer, the occasional mountain lion that made Catherine's eyes widen with fear she tried to hide. He showed her the Winchester rifle model 1873 15 rounds in the magazine tube, and watched her small hands struggle with the weight before she found her grip. "Safety here." His finger dwarfed the lever. "Cock it like this. Shoulder it firm or the recoil will knock you down. Breathe out, squeeze slow, follow through." She fired at a pine stump 30 yards distant, missed by 2 feet, fired again. Closer. By the 10th shot, she was grouping within a handspan of center. Good. He took the rifle back, began reloading. Mountain lions hunt at dawn and dusk. If you see one shoot to kill, they won't run from noise. I've never killed anything before. Her voice was quiet. Taking life was forbidden. So was marriage. So was leaving the order. Sometimes survival requires us to break our own rules. She considered that, then nodded. They walked back to the cabin in silence, her small steps taking 3 for every 2 of his, and he found himself unconsciously slowing his pace to match hers. The second week trouble arrived. Nathan was repairing fence posts along the eastern boundary when he saw them. 6 posts cut clean through at ground level, the work too precise to be animal damage. Boot prints in the soft earth leading east toward Henderson's ranch. He stood among the fallen posts, jaw tight, calculating the hours of work it would take to replace them. More importantly, calculating what it meant. Henderson was testing him, seeing how far he could push before Nathan pushed back. He spent the afternoon digging new post holes, setting replacement posts, tamping earth around cedar that would last 20 years if left alone. Catherine brought him water at midday, said nothing about the vandalism, but he saw her eyes scanning the tree line. Looking for threats she was learning to expect. That evening over venison stew that was slowly improving as Catherine experimented with wild herbs from the creek bank, Nathan made his decision. I need to fortify the cabin. She looked up from her bowl. Because of the fence. Because of what the fence means. Henderson won't stop with posts. What will he do? Nathan considered, lying, softening the truth. But she had married him knowing what he was. She deserved to know what that meant. He'll come with men. Try to run us off before winter. The claim isn't legally mine for 5 years. Until then, possession is 9/10 of the law. And the other 10th, violence. She set down her spoon with deliberate care. I see. I can take you to town. You'd be safe there until this is settled. Maybe you could return to the church, explain this was a mistake. No. Catherine, this isn't Philadelphia. Men die over water rights out here. Then we'll make sure we're not among them. She met his eyes across the table. This is my home too. I won't run from it. I spent 4 years being obedient, being silent, being what others told me to be. I'm done running. The steel in her voice surprised him, pleased him, scared him. Over the next 6 days, Nathan transformed the cabin into a fortress. He boarded the windows from inside with 2-inch oak planks, leaving gun ports angled downward. Cut additional ports in the walls at strategic intervals. Dug a shallow trench around the perimeter for defensive cover. Stockpiled ammunition, counting out 200 rounds for the Winchester 50 for his Colt revolver that he had not touched in 3 years. Catherine watched him work with the rifle, practicing until her shoulder bruised purple and she could hit a man-sized target at 70 yards. She stored water in every container they owned, 40 gallons total. Organized their food supplies with military efficiency. Dried venison, flour, beans, salt. Enough to withstand a 2-week siege if necessary. You've done this before. Nathan observed her work one evening. I've read about it. The siege of Limerick during the Irish Wars. The defenders lasted months. We won't last that long if Henderson brings enough men. Then we'll make sure it doesn't last that long. On the 8th day, Marshal Caldwell rode in at sunset. Nathan met him at the boundary marker, rifle in hand, but not pointed. James dismounted slowly, hands visible, making no sudden movements. Came to warn you. James's voice was tight. Henderson's hiring guns. 3 men coming up from Butte, professional killers. Why tell me? Because despite everything, you're still the closest thing I have to a friend in this territory. And because that woman in there deserves better than to die in a range war. Nathan studied the marshal's face, saw something there beyond duty, guilt maybe, or the shared weight of Fort Collins that never quite lifted no matter how many years passed. These 3 guns, they know me. James hesitated. Frank Wade was in our unit, remembers you from the war. The name hit like a fist. Frank Wade, sharpshooter. The man who had taught Nathan to kill at distance cleanly without remorse. The man who had been reloading when the shooting at Fort Collins had started and had therefore escaped the worst of the guilt. He remembers what I can do. That's why Henderson's paying premium, $750 each plus your land when you're dead. Nathan did the mathematics. $2,250 total, more than the claim was worth, more than the water rights justified. This was personal now. Henderson making a statement about who controlled the valley. When tomorrow dawned, how many total? 3 professionals, Henderson 5 ranch hands, 9 men. Nathan looked back at the cabin. Lamplight glowed through the gun ports. Catherine's silhouette moved past a gap in the boards. Small, determined. His. Tell her to leave. James's voice held something close to pleading. I'll take her to town right now. She doesn't need to be here for this. She won't go. Make her. Nathan turned back to the marshal. You ever try to make that woman do something she's decided against? James almost smiled. No, can't say I have. Then you don't know what stubborn looks like. 4 years in a convent didn't break her. 9 men with guns won't either. The marshal swung back into his saddle, sat there for a long moment silhouetted against the dying light. You're going to kill some of them tomorrow. Maybe all of them. You know that. Yes. And that doesn't bother you after Fort Collins. It bothers me every night, but some things are worth the nightmares. James rode away without another word, leaving Nathan standing in the dusk with a rifle in his hands and Fort Collins in his head, and the knowledge that tomorrow he would become again the thing he had spent 10 years trying to bury. Inside, Catherine was writing. She had paper and ink from town, was composing letters with the focused intensity of someone who believed words could stop bullets. 7 letters. She did not look up. Helena Independent, Montana Post, Salt Lake Tribune, San Francisco Chronicle, the Territorial Governor, the Department of Interior, and the Land Office in Washington, each one detailing Henderson's illegal intimidation of federal land claimants. They won't arrive in time. I know, but if we survive tomorrow, they'll matter. If we don't, there'll be evidence. She set down her pen, finally met his eyes. I heard what the marshal said. 9 men. You were listening. Of course I was listening. This is my life too. Nathan sat across from her, the table between them, her letters spreading across the pine surface like tactical maps. I can't promise I can stop 9 men. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for truth. Truth is I've killed before, more than I like to remember. And tomorrow I'll likely kill more. And the part that should scare you is that I'm good at it. She studied him with those sharp gray eyes. Does it scare you? That I'm good at it, that I might fail more. She stood, walked around the table, and did something that shocked him. She placed her small hand on his shoulder. The touch burned through his shirt like a brand. Then don't fail. That night, Nathan slept 3 hours. Nightmares of Fort Collins mixed with visions of Catherine's body broken, in the yard Henderson's men standing over her, and he woke at 3 in the morning soaked with sweat and certainty that tomorrow would define everything that came after. He rose dressed, checked his weapons with the mechanical precision of a man who had done this too many times. Winchester loaded 15 in the tube. Colt revolver loaded 6 in the cylinder. Spare ammunition in pouches on his belt. Knife in his boot. He was armored in steel and experience, and the kind of violence most men only imagined. Catherine found him at the window watching the pre-dawn darkness. I can shoot. Her voice was steady. I'll take the east window. You take the front. If they get inside, you run. Don't think. Don't hesitate. Just run. Where would I run to? This is the only home I have. The sky lightened. Gray dawn, no clouds, good visibility. Nathan watched the tree line with hunter's eyes looking for movement that did not belong. Birds still sang. That was good. Birds went silent when predators approached. Then the birds stopped. They're here. Catherine moved to her position without being told, checked her rifle, settled into a shooter's stance she had practiced every day for a week. Nathan felt something shift in his chest. Pride, maybe, or fear for what she might have to do. 9 riders emerged from the pines 500 yards out. They came slowly, confidently spread in a loose line. Henderson on his Palomino at center. Frank Wade to his right on a gray gelding, a Sharps rifle across his saddle. The others fanned out ranch hands with more courage than sense, and 2 more professional guns Nathan did not recognize. They stopped at 200 yards. Frank Wade's voice carried across the distance, trained by years of battlefield commands. Blackwood, you got 1 chance to walk away. Nathan opened the shutter over the front gun port. Did not fire, did not respond. Let the silence build. Henderson urged his horse forward, 50 yards. That land's mine. You got until I count 3. Nathan sighted down the Winchester, breathed, found the calm center he had learned in war. The place where time slowed and targets became geometry problems. Wind from the northeast at 5 miles per hour, 200 yards. Slight drop. Lead the target. 1. He squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked across the valley. Henderson's rifle exploded in a shower of splinters, the stock shattered by a bullet that missed the man by 6 inches. The Palomino screamed and bolted. Henderson fought for control, nearly thrown. Nathan worked the lever, ejected brass, chambered a fresh round, found Frank Wade in his sights. Next one doesn't miss. Frank understood. He had taught Nathan to shoot after all, knew exactly how good the student had become. He raised one hand slowly, signaling the others to hold fire. You can't hold forever, Blackwood. We'll burn you out. Try it. For 15 seconds, no one moved. Standoff. Then one of the ranch hands, young and stupid, and probably drunk, spurred his horse forward, drawing his revolver as he charged. Nathan shot him in the shoulder at 180 yards. The man spun from his saddle, hit the ground hard, lay screaming. His horse ran. Anyone else want to test me? The gunfire came all at once. 9 guns, 8 riders. Now that one was down, pouring lead into the cabin. Bullets punched through the shutters, thudded into the oak boards, whined through the gun ports. Nathan dropped below the window line, counted to 3, rose and fired in one smooth motion. He worked the Winchester like a machine. Shoot lever, each shot deliberate, each shot aimed. He hit Frank Wade's horse, dropping it and pinning the gunfighter beneath its weight. Hit another ranch hand in the leg, shattered the wheel of a wagon one of them had foolishly brought as cover. Catherine fired from her window. Her first shot went wild. Her second hit a rider's hat, spinning it off his head. Her third hit flesh. A scream confirmed it. She turned to Nathan, her face pale but composed. I just shot a man. I need to say an act of contrition. Later, keep shooting. The fight lasted 15 minutes, a sustained violence. Bullets flew both directions. Nathan took a graze across his ribs that burned like fire, but did not slow him. Catherine methodically worked her rifle, her face pale but determined, muttering prayers between shots. Then one of the professional guns, a man Nathan did not know, pulled dynamite from his saddlebag. Down, Nathan grabbed Catherine, pulled her to the floor. The explosion came 3 seconds later. Too short. The dynamite landed 20 feet from the cabin, blew a crater in the earth-shattered fence posts, but did nothing to the structure. Amateur hour. Professional killers who were not professional enough. Nathan rose, fury replacing calculation. Put 3 shots through the gun port so fast they sounded like one continuous roll. The dynamite thrower went down. Did not get up. Catherine crossed herself quickly. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord. He was trying to kill us. I know, but he was still a soul. God have mercy on him. Nathan stared at her, this tiny woman who could shoot a man and pray for him in the same breath, and felt something shift in his chest he didn't have words for. Cease fire, Frank Wade's voice high and panicked. Cease fire. The shooting stopped. Smoke drifted across the yard. Brass casings littered the cabin floor. Nathan's ears rang. His ribs bled. His hands shook with adrenaline, and the old familiar feeling of violence completed. Blackwood. Frank was crawling from beneath his dead horse, limping. You win. We're done. Get off my land. We need to collect our wounded. Nathan thought about saying no, thought about finishing what they had started. Then Catherine touched his arm. Let them go. Mercy is still mercy, even when it's undeserved. He looked at her, saw something in her eyes, not fear, not pity. Understanding maybe that some lines once crossed could not be uncrossed. Take your wounded. Take your dead. If I see any of you again, I shoot on sight. They gathered their casualties. 2 dead, Nathan counted, 5 wounded. Henderson and Frank among the survivors, both limping, both defeated. They rode east without looking back, leaving blood trails in the dirt. The silence after they left was louder than the gunfire. Nathan checked the damage. 47 bullet holes in the walls, 3 windows destroyed. The water barrel by the door shattered precious water soaking into thirsty earth. But the cabin stood. The foundation held. They had survived. He turned to find Catherine sitting on the floor, rifle across her lap, shaking. Not crying, just shaking, the adrenaline leaving her system, leaving only the reality of what they had done. "I shot a man." Her voice was barely audible. "I saw blood. I broke the fifth commandment." Nathan knelt beside her, wanted to touch or comfort her, but his hands were still wrapped around his rifle, and they felt like foreign objects attached to arms that belonged to someone else. "You defended your home. Is that what we call it? Or is this just murder with better justification? There's a difference, is there? The Catechism says, 'Thou shalt not kill.' It doesn't say, 'unless they shoot first.'" Nathan sat back, absorbing her words. "After Fort Collins, I told myself the same thing, that there's no difference between killing in war and murder, that God doesn't care about context. But I was wrong." "How?" "Because Fort Collins was slaughter of the innocent. This was survival against men who came to kill us. And if you can't tell the difference, then you're more lost than I am." She considered that, nodded slowly. "I'll still confess it, when I can, if I ever see a priest again." "You think God will forgive you?" "I think God already has. The question is whether I can forgive myself." The sound of hoofbeats brought them both to their feet, weapons raised. But it was not Henderson returning. It was a wagon, multiple wagons, and people. Dozens of people. Marshal Caldwell led them, but behind him came newspapermen with cameras, townspeople with curious faces, and most surprising of all, the territorial governor's representative, a man in an expensive suit who looked deeply uncomfortable on horseback. "Hold your fire, Blackwood," James called. "They're here because of your wife's letters." The letters. Catherine had sent them 3 days ago. Impossible timing, but somehow the right people had been in the right place. The Helena Independent reporter had been in the governor's office when Catherine's letter arrived. The governor's man had been curious enough to investigate. And James Caldwell, whatever his complicated feelings about Nathan, had been lawman enough to bring witnesses. The newspaper man, Charles Preston, dismounted and surveyed the damage. Bullet holes, dead horses, blood soaking into Montana soil. His eyes lit with the particular hunger of a man who had just found his front page story. "Mr. Blackwood, Mrs. Blackwood." He tipped his hat to Catherine. "Your letters were quite compelling, ma'am. Looks like you weren't exaggerating." "No, sir, I was not. Former nun defends homestead. Mail-order bride turned rifle shooter. The papers will love this story." Catherine's face paled. "I'd prefer not to be in the papers." "Too late for that, ma'am. Your news now." For the next 2 hours, Nathan and Catherine told their story to newspapermen, to the governor's representative, to Marshal Caldwell, acting in official capacity. They showed the cut fence posts, the bullet holes, the bodies which James had covered with blankets but left in place as evidence. Frank Wade and the survivors had been caught on the road by James's posse. Now they sat in chains waiting for transport to Helena and trial. The governor's man, a lawyer named Thompson, examined the homestead papers with professional thoroughness. "Your claim is legally sound, Mr. Blackwood. Water rights follow the land under federal survey. Henderson had no legal standing. Tell that to Henderson." "I will. In court, along with charges of attempted murder, destruction of federal property, and conspiracy to deprive citizens of their legal rights. Cole Henderson will see the inside of a jail cell for quite some time." Preston, the newspaper man, was photographing everything. The cabin, the damage. Nathan standing next to Catherine, the size difference dramatic even in still images. "Former nun and homesteader defend claim. This will run in every paper from here to San Francisco." Catherine looked distressed. "I'd rather not bring attention to my former vocation." "Ma'am, that's the story. Bride of Christ becomes bride of frontiersman. People eat this up." As the crowd dispersed, promising to return with federal marshals and proper legal proceedings, James Caldwell lingered. "You fought well." The marshal's voice was quiet, meant only for Nathan. "Like the old days. I fought to survive. Different motivation than Fort Collins." "Is it?" James met his eyes. "You still killed men today." "I know what I am." "Do you do? Because I'm looking at a man who defended his home and his wife. That's not the same as what we did 10 years ago. Nathan wanted to believe that, wanted to draw a clean line between killing in war and killing in self-defense. But the bodies looked the same. The blood smelled the same. His hands felt the same. I need to check on Catherine. He found her inside on her knees before the small crucifix on her bedroom wall praying in Latin. The old prayers, the confession, the absolution she could give herself but didn't trust. He stood in the doorway watching her small form bent in prayer and felt something break in his chest. When she finished, she rose slowly, turned to face him. I killed a man today, Nathan. And the worst part is, I'm not sorry. I should be sorry. I should feel guilt. But all I feel is relief that we're alive. He crossed the room, knelt so they were eye level. Up close, he could see the stress in her face, the exhaustion in her eyes, but also something harder. Something forged by violence into something that would not break easily. You feel relief because you lived. That's human. Is it, or is that what you told yourself after Fort Collins? The question hit deeper than bullets. He sat back, absorbing it. After Fort Collins, I felt nothing but guilt. For years, still do. This is different. How? Because Fort Collins was slaughter. This was survival. And if you can't tell the difference, then you're more lost than I am. She considered that, nodded slowly. The nightmares will come anyway, won't they? Yes. Then we'll face them together. That night, after the last of the townspeople departed, after James posted 2 deputies to guard the property until federal marshals arrived, after the blood was washed from the porch and the dead were carted away, Nathan and Catherine sat by the fire and said nothing. Words felt inadequate to the day they had survived, so they sat in silence, and eventually Catherine fell asleep in her chair, exhausted beyond measure. Nathan carried her to her small room, laid her on the bed, still fully dressed, covered her with the quilt. She stirred but did not wake. He stood in the doorway watching her breathe, this small, fierce woman who had shot a man to defend ground she had owned for less than 2 weeks. He pulled the door closed and returned to the fire. His ribs ached where the bullet had grazed. His hands still shook with adrenaline delayed. His mind replayed the fight, analyzing every shot, every decision, cataloging mistakes and successes with soldier's precision. He had killed 2 men today, maybe 3, depending on whether the dynamite thrower survived his wounds. Added to the bodies from Fort Collins, his count was now somewhere in the teens. He had lost exact track years ago, another sin to add to the pile. But Catherine lived. The cabin stood. The claim held. And for the first time in 10 years, Nathan Blackwood felt something other than guilt about violence committed. He felt pride. That scared him more than anything else. The trials came in November. Federal court in Helena, presided over by a judge imported from territorial headquarters. The courtroom was packed with spectators. Range wars made for popular entertainment, and a former nun who could shoot made for even better gossip. Cole Henderson sat in chains, his face purple with rage, as witness after witness testified. Nathan testified. Catherine testified, her educated vocabulary and precise recollection of events, making her a devastating witness. The newspapermen testified. Even Frank Wade offered immunity for his testimony, confirmed that Henderson had hired them to kill or drive off Nathan Blackwood. The verdict came after 3 hours of deliberation, guilty on all counts. Henderson sentenced to 2 years in territorial prison, $500 fine, permanent injunction against interfering with Blackwood's water rights. Nathan felt no satisfaction in the verdict, only the hollow certainty that Henderson would emerge from prison, still angry, still dangerous, still convinced that the valley belonged to him. They rode home in silence, Catherine beside him on the wagon bench, the late autumn sun slanting across the valley in shades of gold and amber. The cabin came into view, patched now where bullets had torn stronger in its mended places than it had been before. We should plant trees. Catherine spoke suddenly, surprising him. Along the fence line, cottonwoods. They grow fast, provide windbreak. Good idea. And next spring I want to start a garden. Vegetables, herbs, maybe flowers. You planning to stay then? She looked at him, and something in her expression had changed since the siege. Softened in some ways, hardened in others. Where else would I go? The church doesn't want me. Philadelphia doesn't need me. This is home. Home. The words settled into Nathan's chest like a foundation stone. He had built the cabin, claimed the land, married the woman. But only now, hearing her call it home, did it feel real. That night, he could not sleep. The nightmares came as predicted. Fort Collins mixed with the siege. Faces of the dead, both sets all watching him with empty eyes. He woke gasping, reached for the revolver he kept by his bed, realized he was in the cabin and not on a battlefield. Soft footsteps in the darkness. Catherine's door opening. She appeared in his doorway wrapped in the quilt from her bed. "I heard you." Her voice was gentle. "The nightmares. I'm sorry I woke you. I was already awake. My own nightmares." She hesitated at the threshold. "May I?" He nodded, not trusting his voice. She crossed the room, sat on the edge of his bed, and did something he did not expect. She took his hand, her small fingers wrapped around two of his, barely spanning them. "Tell me about Fort Collins. All of it." So he did. In the darkness, with her hand in his, he told her everything. The march, the scouts' report, Lieutenant Caldwell's orders to attack at dawn, the teepees in the morning light, the realization too late that they were not warriors but families, the children running, the women screaming, his rifle firing because stopping meant admitting what they were doing and he was not strong enough to stop. He told her about the girl, maybe 8 years old, how she had looked at him before the bullet hit, how her face appeared in his dreams more nights than not. He told her about deserting, about James deserting with him, about 10 years of running from something that could not be outrun. When he finished, his face was wet with tears. He had not known he was crying. Catherine said nothing for a long time, just sat there holding his hand, her thumb tracing small circles on his knuckles. "You can't undo it," she said finally. "What's done is done, but you can build something that matters more, something that outlasts the killing." "How, this?" She gestured to the cabin around them. "Yes, the life we're building. That matters more than Fort Collins. Not because Fort Collins doesn't matter. It always will. But because what we build here can be the answer to what you did there." He wanted to believe her. Wanted to believe that building could balance destroying. But the mathematics did not work. One cabin against dozens of dead. One marriage against a massacre. "I don't deserve this," he whispered. "You, the land, any of it. Probably not, but you have it anyway. So the question is what you do with it." She paused. "I don't deserve it either. I broke sacred vows. I killed a man. I'm living in mortal sin according to every teaching I grew up with. But here we are anyway. Two broken people trying to build something whole." She stayed with him until dawn, sitting on his bed holding his hand, saying nothing more because nothing more needed saying. When the first light touched the window, she rose and returned to her room, and Nathan felt the loss of her presence like a physical ache. But something had shifted between them. Some wall had come down. He did not know what to call it. Not love, not yet, but something that might become love if given time and care, and the kind of attention he gave to carpentry. The winter that followed tested them in different ways. Snow came early and deep, piling 6 feet against the north wall of the cabin. The temperature dropped to 20 below and stayed there for weeks. Nathan had cut enough firewood, but barely. They burned through their stores with frightening speed. Hunting became impossible. The elk and deer had moved to lower elevations. Nathan set snares for rabbits, checked his trap lines every morning, but game was scarce. Their food supplies, carefully calculated, for 2 people for 5 months, began to run low by February. One morning, Nathan woke to find Catherine shivering despite the fire. Her lips had a blue tinge. The cabin, built well but built quickly, had gaps he had not properly chinked. Cold air seeped through stealing heat faster than the fireplace could provide it. He spent that day rechinked every gap he could find, mixing mud and moss, forcing it into cracks with his bare hands until his fingers bled from cold. Catherine helped her smaller hands, reaching places his could not. They worked in silence, their breath fogging the air inside the cabin. That night, she appeared at his door again. But this time, she was not there for nightmares. "I'm too cold." Simple statement of fact. "My room is smaller, harder to heat. May I?" He pulled back the blankets without a word. She climbed in, still wrapped in her quilt, and settled against the wall, leaving a careful distance between them. But cold did not respect distance. Slowly, as the night deepened and the temperature dropped further, she moved closer. Not deliberately, just the unconscious seeking of warmth. By midnight, she was pressed against his side, his arm around her shoulders, sharing heat, because survival demanded it. He felt her heartbeat against his ribs, felt her breath on his neck, felt a stirring of something he had thought violence had killed in him. Nathan, her voice was soft in the darkness. Yes, thank you for the room, the crucifix, all of it. I know you built it thinking I'd need my own space, but she turned to look up at him, and even in the darkness, he could see her eyes. I don't think I need as much space as you gave me. What do you need? I need to not be cold, and I need to not be alone. Everything else we can figure out as we go. He tightened his arm around her shoulders. I'm not good at this, at being close to someone. I'm afraid I'll hurt you. You won't. You can't know that. Yes, I can, because I've seen you handle glass without breaking it. I've seen you carve crucifixes from pine. I've seen you lift me like I weigh nothing and set me down like I'm made of snow. You know exactly how strong you are. That's the same as knowing how gentle to be. She was right, and the rightness of it settled something in his chest that had been unsettled since Fort Collins. They fell asleep like that, wrapped together against the cold, and for the first time in 10 years, Nathan slept without nightmares. The spring thaw came in late March, turning the world to mud and running water. The creek swelled to 3 times its normal size, roaring past the cabin with the voice of winter's end. Nathan walked his fence lines, checking for damage, and found something that made his heart sink. Gold. Not much, just flakes caught in the creek gravel where the winter runoff had scoured down to bedrock, but enough to change everything. Gold meant people. Gold meant claim jumpers. Gold meant the relative isolation they had fought to protect would end. He panned a few samples, confirmed what he suspected. Maybe $1,500 worth in a quarter-mile of creek bed, enough to pay debts, buy equipment, secure the ranch for years to come, enough to attract attention they could not afford. He told Catherine that night over dinner. We should keep it quiet, she said immediately. Register a mining claim, but tell no one about the assay. Work it slowly, carefully. Save the money for when we need it. Smart. I read about the California gold rush, how men killed each other over claims. I'd rather stay alive and poor than rich and dead. They registered the claim through a lawyer in Helena, swearing him to secrecy. Hired 2 workers from town men. James Caldwell vouched for paying them wages to work a claim they were told was barely profitable. The gold went into a strongbox buried beneath the cabin floor. By summer, they had $1,700 in gold dust and nuggets, a fortune by Montana standards, poverty by California standards, exactly enough to be dangerous. The town had grown around them. 3 more families filed homestead claims on adjacent sections. They formed a loose community, helping each other with harvests, sharing tools, watching each other's backs. Someone proposed calling the settlement Blackwood Creek. Nathan objected. They named it anyway. In August, a letter arrived, not from Philadelphia this time, but from Denver. Nathan recognized the official seal before Catherine opened it. The Diocese of Colorado, her former bishop. Catherine's face went white as she read. He found me. Her voice was barely a whisper. Bishop Malone. He knows I married. The letter was formal and cold. Catherine's vows, while not final, were still binding in the eyes of the church. Her marriage was invalid. She was living in sin. She was commanded to return to Denver immediately to answer for her apostasy. Failure to comply would result in excommunication. Nathan read the letter 3 times, his jaw tightening with each pass. He can't enforce this. You left the order. You're married. Free. Can he? I don't know canon law well enough. I don't know if my first vows can be dissolved without the church's permission. She trailed off, fear replacing the steel he had grown accustomed to. Then we'll find out. And if he comes here, he'll learn what it means to threaten what's mine. But even as he said it, Nathan knew the truth. The church was powerful. The church had lawyers. And bishops, particularly when faced with defiant nuns, sometimes wielded authority that transcended territorial law. They consulted with the territorial attorney. The news was mixed. The church might have grounds, might not, would require a judge to decide. And judges, particularly Catholic judges, sometimes ruled in ways that favored church authority over individual choice. We fight it, Nathan said, whatever it takes. It could cost everything we've saved. Then we spend everything we've saved. You're not going back to him. She looked at him for a long moment, and something in her expression shifted, softened. Opened. I love you. Simple words. Devastating in their honesty. I didn't mean to. Didn't plan it, but I do. Nathan felt the words settle into him like roots finding soil. He had not said those words to anyone in 20 years. Did not know if he remembered how. I'm not good with words. Then don't use them. He crossed the room, knelt so they were eye level, and kissed her. Gentle at first, testing, but she rose into it with surprising strength. Her hands found his face, fingers tracing the scar on his jaw, and he pulled her close, careful of his strength, conscious of her fragility. When they parted, both breathless, she smiled. See, you're perfectly good at some things. That night, the distance between their homes disappeared entirely. They had 3 weeks before Bishop Malone arrived in Montana Territory, and Nathan intended to use every hour of it preparing for battle. Bishop Malone arrived on the afternoon stage 3 weeks later, dressed in clerical black that looked obscene against Montana dust. He brought a Monsignor who carried himself like a prosecutor and a church lawyer whose briefcase screamed expensive litigation. They took rooms at the Helena Hotel and sent word to the Blackwood Ranch that the bishop requested an audience with Sister Mary Catherine. Nathan sent word back that Sister Mary Catherine no longer existed and Bishop Malone could go to hell. The confrontation came the next morning. Nathan was repairing the barn door when 3 horses approached. He set down his hammer, slowly checked the revolver on his hip, out of habit, and waited. Bishop Malone was 55, soft around the middle, hard around the eyes, the kind of man who had never worked with his hands, but had spent decades wielding power over people who had. He dismounted with the careful movements of someone unused to horses. "Mr. Blackwood, I presume. Get off my land. I'm here on church business. Sister Mary Catherine has violated her vows and entered into an invalid union. I have canonical authority to demand her return." The lawyer stepped forward, producing documents from his briefcase. Nathan did not look at them. He was watching the Monsignor cataloging weapons, calculating distances, falling into old patterns he had tried to bury. "She's not Sister Mary Catherine. She's Catherine Blackwood, my wife. Marriage entered into while under first vows is invalid in the eyes of God and the church. She remains bound to her vocation." Nathan's hand moved toward his revolver. The Monsignor tensed. The lawyer took a step backward. The moment balanced on a knife edge. Then Catherine emerged from the cabin. Not in nun's habit, not anymore. In her simple gray dress, her dark hair in a braid, looking every inch the frontier woman she had become. "Bishop Malone," her voice was cold, "you should leave. Now." "Sister Catherine, you look different." The bishop's tone was conversational, but his eyes were hard. "I've come to bring you home." "I am home." "No, child, you're in violation of canon law. Your first profession binds you until your novitiate is complete. You owe the church 1 more year. After that, you may discern your vocation freely." The lawyer handed papers to Nathan. Legal language in dense paragraphs, but the meaning was clear enough. Church law, first profession, binding contract until completion of novitiate. If legitimate, it might actually be enforceable. "How much?" Nathan's voice was flat. "Excuse me?" "The church didn't pay your train fare from Denver out of charity. How much to release her from her vows?" Bishop Malone's expression flickered. "Well, since we're being direct, the Sisters of Mercy invested 4 years in Sister Catherine's formation. Training, housing, education. Let's say $2,000 compensates the order fairly, plus my travel expenses, legal fees." He pretended to calculate. "Call it $3,000 and we'll consider her vows dissolved." Nathan had $1,700 in gold, everything they had saved. Everything between survival and destitution. He looked at Catherine, saw her shaking her head minutely. "I'll need a week to arrange the funds. You have 3 days. After that, I take legal action, and she returns to Denver willingly or in the custody of federal marshals." The bishop and his men departed, raising dust that hung in the still air. Nathan watched them go, his jaw so tight his teeth ached. "We're not paying him." Catherine's voice shook with rage. "I won't let you spend everything we've worked for on church extortion. I won't let him take you. Then we fight, in court, with lawyers of our own. But lawyers cost money they did not have. And territorial judges, particularly Catholic judges, sometimes ruled in ways that favored church authority. That night, Marshal Caldwell arrived unannounced. Heard about your visitor. James dismounted, accepted coffee, sat at their table with the weariness of a man who had seen too much of human nature. Bishop Malone's been asking questions in town. About you, Nathan. About Fort Collins. He can't use that against us. James shook his head. He's not planning to. But I did some digging, contacted federal authorities in Denver, asked them to investigate Bishop Malone. Nathan looked at James, says, "Why say so?" "Because 10 years ago I gave an order that killed innocent people. I've spent every day since trying to balance that scale. This is me balancing it." James pulled a telegram from his pocket. "You want to know what they found?" He pushed the telegram across the table. Catherine read it, her face going pale, then flushed with anger. "Embezzlement. He's been stealing from diocesan funds, $30,000 over 7 years. Federal authorities have been building a case. They just needed him on federal land where church influence couldn't protect him. He's in Montana now. Montana's federal territory. If I arrest him, they want him extradited." Nathan looked at James. "Why tell us this?" "Because it ends clean. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, I arrest Bishop Malone on federal charges. By the time his lawyer figures out what's happening, he'll be on a train east. Your marriage stands. Catherine's free." It was too convenient, too clean. Nathan had learned not to trust clean solutions. "What do you need from us?" "Nothing. Just stay out of my way. And Nathan, after this, you and I are even. Fort Collins, the siege, all of it. Debt paid." James left shortly after. Nathan and Catherine sat in silence, turning over the information like cards in a game neither had asked to play. "It could be a trap," Catherine said finally. "It could be justice, as fun. In my experience, those are rarely the same thing." But the next morning at 9 o'clock, Marshal Caldwell arrested Bishop Malone on the steps of the Helena Hotel. The lawyer protested, threatened, cited canon law. James ignored him, cited federal authority, and had the bishop in chains before the lawyer could send a telegram. The Monsignor vanished. The lawyer slunk back to Denver on the next stage. And Bishop Malone, screaming about religious persecution, was transported east to face embezzlement charges that would see him defrocked and imprisoned. Nathan and Catherine watched from across the street as the wagon carried him away. "It's over," she said. "It's never over. But it's done." She took his hand, small fingers wrapping around his. "I want a baby." The word stopped him cold. "What?" "I want a child, our child. I want to build something that outlasts us. Isn't that what this is all about? Legacy?" Nathan thought about his size, about the medical impossibilities, about Dr. Mitchell's warnings that he had voiced to no one. "Catherine, I'm twice your size. A child of mine would be too large for you to carry." "You don't know that." "I do. I've seen women die in childbirth from babies half the size any child of mine would be." She turned to face him, and her eyes held the same steel that had made her fire a rifle at armed men. "Then I'll be the first to survive. Because I'm not leaving this world without giving you something good. Something that isn't about violence or running or guilt. I'm giving you a family, Nathan Blackwood. Whether you think you deserve it or not." 3 months later, she was pregnant. Dr. Mitchell confirmed it with the grim expression of a man delivering a terminal diagnosis. He requested a private word with Nathan. "Her hips are too narrow. The baby will be large, I can already tell. She's carrying high and wide, which means a big child." Mitchell removed his spectacles, cleaned them, a delaying tactic while he found words. "Mr. Blackwood, I've delivered 47 babies in this territory. I've buried 12 mothers. With your wife's size and your genetics, I'm estimating her odds at 50-50, maybe worse. What can we do?" "Pray. Keep her healthy. When the time comes, be prepared to make a choice." "What choice?" Mitchell's silence was answer enough. Save the mother or save the child? Never both. Nathan told Catherine none of this. Instead, he built. He built a cradle from pine, sanding it smooth enough that no splinter could catch soft skin. Built a changing table at exactly the right height. Built toys from scrap wood, practicing for a future he was terrified would never come. Winter arrived early and stayed late. Snow piled 6 feet deep by January 1884. Catherine's belly swelled massive and terrifying, and Nathan watched her move through the cabin with increasing difficulty, terrified that every stumble would be the one that killed her. In February, Cole Henderson was released from territorial prison, having served 18 months of his 2-year sentence for good behavior. Nathan heard about it from James. He's been drinking, talking. Says you ruined his life, says he'll have his revenge. Let him talk. He's doing more than talking. I've seen him watching your ranch from the tree line. Hasn't violated the injunction yet, but he's testing boundaries. Nathan increased his patrols, checking fence lines with rifle in hand, watching for movement that did not belong. Catherine was 8 months pregnant, moving slowly vulnerable. If Henderson wanted revenge, this would be the time. The attack came at midnight on a moonless night in March. Nathan woke to the smell of smoke, rolled out of bed, grabbed his revolver, and found flames climbing the barn wall. Henderson had set fire to the structure, was probably hoping to draw Nathan out into the open for a clean shot. Instead, Nathan went low and fast, circling wide through snow that came to his thighs. Found Henderson crouched behind the water trough, rifle raised, waiting. Nathan could have shot him, should have shot him, ended the threat permanently. Instead, he came from behind, grabbed Henderson's rifle barrel, and yanked it from his hand so hard the man's trigger finger broke. Henderson screamed, swung a wild punch that Nathan blocked with his forearm. They went down in the snow, Henderson beneath him, and Nathan felt the old rage rising. The Fort Collins rage. The rage that did not stop until everything was broken. His hands found Henderson's throat. Squeezed. Watched the man's face turn purple. Felt the cartilage beginning to collapse. Would take 10 more seconds. 10 seconds to end a problem permanently. Nathan, Catherine's voice cut through the rage like a blade. He looked up to find her standing in the doorway, swollen with child, holding the Winchester. Let him go. Nathan's hands loosened incrementally. Henderson gasped, choking. He tried to kill us. I know, but if you kill him, you become what you were, and I need you to be what you are. The distinction mattered. Nathan released Henderson's throat, stood slowly. Henderson lay in the snow, coughing blood, his face a mask of hatred and defeat. You should have killed me, Blackwood. I know, but my wife's smarter than I am, and holier. James arrived minutes later, alerted by the flames. Arrested Henderson for arson, attempted murder, violation of injunction. This time the sentence would be longer. Much longer. As the marshal led Henderson away, Nathan turned to Catherine. You shouldn't be out here in the cold. You shouldn't be strangling people to death. We all have our flaws. But as he helped her back to the cabin, he felt her stumble, caught her before she fell, and when he looked at her face, she was pale, sweating despite the cold. Nathan, the baby, something's wrong. Dr. Mitchell arrived at dawn, examined Catherine, and delivered the news Nathan had been dreading for 9 months. The baby's breech, feet first instead of head, and it's large, very large. I'd estimate 13, maybe 14 pounds. Mitchell's hands were steady, but his voice was not. We need to try to turn it, but if that doesn't work, he trailed off. Tell me the truth, all of it. If I can't turn the baby, she'll die trying to deliver it naturally. If I perform a cesarean section, which I've only done twice before, she has maybe a 20% chance of surviving the blood loss. I don't have the equipment for transfusions. I barely have proper surgical tools. Mitchell met Nathan's eyes. You're going to have to choose, mother or child. I can't save both. Nathan felt the world tilt. Let me talk to her. Catherine was lucid, though in increasing pain. He knelt beside the bed, took her hand, and told her everything. The odds, the choice, the impossibility of the situation they faced. You have to save the baby. Her voice was clear, certain. Promise me. No. Nathan, please. I grew up unloved, in an orphanage. This child deserves better. Promise me you'll choose the baby. I can't lose you. You'll lose us both if you don't choose. At least this way, part of us survives. Part of our love. Part of what we built. She squeezed his hand. I'm not afraid to die. I've been preparing for it since I took my first vows. What I'm afraid of is that child growing up without knowing how wanted he was. How loved. You have to be here to tell him that. The labor lasted 18 hours. Mitchell tried everything to turn the baby. Failed. Tried again. Failed again. The pain was inhuman. Catherine screamed until her voice broke, then screamed silently, her body arching with contractions that should have delivered the child but could not, because physics would not allow a 13-pound breech baby through a pelvis, built for someone half Nathan's size. Between contractions, she prayed. Latin, English, Irish, Gaelic. Every prayer she had ever learned, all offered up to a God she wasn't sure was listening. At hour 16, Mitchell pulled Nathan aside. I have to cut, now, or we lose them both. She said, save the baby. And you, what do you say? Nathan looked at Catherine, unconscious now, from exhaustion and pain. Looked at the swell of her belly where his child lived. Thought about promises and debts and the scales he had been trying to balance since Fort Collins. Save them both. I don't care what it takes. Save them both, Mitchell nodded. I'll try 'em, but I'm telling you now, this is going to be the longest hour of your life. The doctor was wrong. It was the longest 90 minutes of Nathan's life. He sat outside the bedroom door, listening to sounds no man should hear. Catherine screaming as consciousness returned. Mitchell barking orders to the midwife who had arrived from town. The wet sounds of surgery performed on a kitchen table with whiskey as anesthesia and hope as the only real medicine. And then cutting through everything else, a sound Nathan had never expected to hear. A baby crying, loud, furious, alive. Mitchell emerged, blood to his elbows, holding a massive infant that looked too large to be real. Boy, 13 pounds, 2 ounces, healthy, strong, already fighting. Nathan took his son in trembling hands. The baby was huge, red-faced, squalling with the outrage of someone who had been evicted from warmth into cold Montana air. Perfect fingers, perfect toes. A face that would look like Nathan's someday, maybe, if he lived long enough to grow into it. Catherine, Nathan's voice cracked on her name. Fighting. She's bleeding badly. I've got the wound sutured, but I can't stop all the bleeding. The next hour will tell us everything. Nathan sat in the main room holding his son, watching the closed bedroom door like it was the gateway to heaven or hell. The baby quieted in his arms, sensing perhaps the size of the hands that held him, finding comfort in being small against something even larger. Your mama's name is Catherine. Nathan's voice was hoarse. She was a nun once, bride of Christ, but she chose to be my wife instead. She chose to give you life, and you're going to know her. You hear me? You're going to know her because she's going to live through this. Because women who shoot rifles and break sacred vows don't die in childbirth. That's not how this story ends. Hour 17. The midwife emerged to heat more water. Her face was drawn but not despairing. That it was something. Hour 18. Dr. Mitchell came out, washed blood from his hands, accepted coffee with shaking fingers. She's alive, unconscious but alive. The bleeding stopped. I can't promise she'll wake up. Can't promise she won't develop infection. But she's alive. Nathan nodded, unable to speak. You have a son, Blackwood. What will you name him? Ezra, it means helper, because God helped us today. God and about 40 years of medical training, but I'll take the assist. Catherine woke on the third day. Nathan was sitting beside her bed holding Ezra when her eyes fluttered open. The baby. Her voice was barely audible. Nathan placed their son in her arms, watched her small hands struggle with his weight, then find purchase, cradling him against her chest. He's perfect. Tears streamed down her face. He's so perfect. Like his mother. She looked up at Nathan, and something in her expression was different. Harder, changed by pain into something that could not be broken by anything less than death. Mitchell told me, I can't have more children. The scarring is too severe. One son is enough. One son and one wife who's alive. That's more than I deserve. Then we'll make sure he grows up knowing how wanted he was, how loved, how his mother broke every vow she'd ever made to give him life. They named him Ezra Nathan Blackwood, baptized him in the creek when summer came with no priest, just Catherine's prayers and Nathan's promises. Watched him grow with the peculiar speed of children who carry their father's genetics, doubling in size by 6 months, learning to crawl by 7, walking by 10 months despite a body that seemed too large for infant coordination. The town grew around them. Blackwood Creek was officially incorporated in 1888, population 240. A church was built. Then a school. James Caldwell resigned as Marshall took the position of school teacher, found peace in educating the next generation instead of arresting the current one. Life settled into rhythms. Nathan worked the land, raised cattle, planted wheat. Catherine taught their son to read before age 3, her educated background, finding purpose in creating another educated soul. She taught Sunday school at the church using her novitiate training to explain scripture to children who had never known formal religion. Ezra grew like a weed, gentle despite his size, protective of smaller children, his father's son, in every way that mattered. Then in 1809, when Ezra was 15 and Nathan 47, Cole Henderson was released from his second prison sentence. He came at dawn with a rifle and 15 years of hatred. Nathan was checking fence lines when the shot rang out, felt the bullet crease his shoulder burning like fire, fell from his horse more from surprise than injury, looked up to see Henderson 50 yards away, working the bolt on his rifle for a second shot. Nathan rolled behind a tree, drawing his revolver, but he was 47 now instead of 37. Slower, softer. The years of peace had dulled edges that violence kept sharp. Henderson's second shot shattered bark inches from Nathan's head. "Should have killed me when you had the chance, Blackwood." Nathan knew Henderson was right. Mercy had seemed noble 15 years ago. Now it seemed naive. He checked his revolver. 6 rounds against a man with a rifle at range. Bad odds. Then a different rifle shot cracked across the valley. From a different direction. Henderson screamed, dropped his weapon, clutching his leg. Ezra emerged from the tree line, holding Nathan's Winchester like he had been born to it. 15 years old, 6'2", and already comfortable with violence in a way that made Nathan's heart hurt. "Stay down," Nathan shouted, but Ezra was advancing, rifle raised, moving with a tactical awareness no child should have. He reached Henderson, kicked the man's rifle away, kept him covered, while Nathan approached. Henderson was bleeding from a thigh wound. Clean shot. Deliberate. Ezra had aimed to wound, not kill. "Papa." Ezra's voice was steady. "He all right. He'll live. Where'd you learn to shoot like that?" "Been practicing. Mr. Caldwell teaches marksmanship after school." Nathan looked at his son, saw himself at that age, saw the capacity for violence that genetics and circumstance had created, felt fear and pride in equal measure. James arrived with deputies, arrested Henderson for the third and final time. This time the charge was attempted murder of a town founder, which carried serious weight. Henderson would spend the rest of his life in territorial prison. That night, Nathan sat Ezra down for a conversation 15 years overdue. "You shot a man today. I saved your life. Both can be true, but now you've crossed a line, and I need you to understand what that means." Nathan told him everything. Fort Collins, the massacre, the 10 years of running, the nightmares that still came most nights, the weight of killing, even righteous killing, even necessary killing. "I'm not sorry I shot him." Ezra met his father's eyes without flinching. "He was trying to kill you." "I know, and I'm grateful. But gratitude doesn't erase what it means to take another man's life, even if you don't finish it. That weight stays with you, becomes part of who you are. Like it became part of you. Yes, and I don't want that for you. I want you to build things, create things, not spend your life balancing scales like I have." Ezra considered this. "But you did balance them. Look at this town. Look at what you built. Isn't that the point? Not that you killed people, but what you did after. The wisdom of children." Nathan pulled his son close, this massive child who was growing into a massive man, and held him tight. "You're smarter than I was at your age. Your mother's influence. Mama says God doesn't judge us by our worst moments. He judges us by what we build from the ruins. Your mama's usually right." Time moved faster after that. Ezra grew to 6'4" by age 18, stopped growing only because Catherine's genetics finally asserted themselves. He was massive, but not a giant, strong, but not overwhelming. Perfect. He courted Sarah Thompson at 17, married her at 19, took over half the ranch operations at 21. Nathan watched his son build a life with the same careful precision Nathan had once used to build a cabin, and felt the particular pride of a man watching his legacy take shape. In 1888, when Ezra was 4 years old, Catherine gave birth to twins. "Impossible," Dr. Mitchell said when he confirmed the pregnancy. The scarring from Ezra's birth should have prevented conception. But nature had found a way. Catherine was 32, carrying children that should not exist. Mitchell monitored her, carefully expecting the worst. But this time was different. The twins were smaller. One took after Nathan, one took after Catherine. When labor came, it lasted only 8 hours. The babies emerged one after the other, neither breech, neither dangerous. Girl, Mitchell announced, first holding a tiny infant. 5 pounds, 10 ounces. Perfect. Bold, he announced, second holding a larger baby. 7 pounds, 8 ounces. Healthy. Nathan held his daughter in one arm, his son in the other. Two more children. Two more chances at redemption. Grace, Catherine said from the bed, pointing to the girl. Grace Elizabeth. Because Grace saved us all. Samuel, Nathan added, looking at the boy. Samuel James, after the prophet who heard God's voice. They raised the twins with the same care they had raised Ezra, but the experience was different. Grace took after Catherine completely. Small, intelligent, determined. Samuel was somewhere between tall but not giant, strong but not overwhelming. By 1915, the family had grown to include Ezra's 3 children, Samuel's 2, and Grace's career as the territory's first female doctor trained at the University of Michigan Medical School. The town had swelled to 800 residents. Blackwood, Montana was no longer a settlement. It was a community, a legacy. Nathan was 63 that year. His hair had gone gray. His hands shook from decades of hard labor. His back hurt most mornings. But he was alive. Catherine was alive. Their children thrived. And the land they had fought for 3 decades earlier now supported dozens of families who had come west seeking the same thing Nathan had sought in 1882. A second chance. On a warm evening in August, Nathan sat on the porch of the house that had expanded from a 2-room cabin into something approaching a mansion. Catherine sat beside him, her hair white now, but her eyes as sharp as the day she had left the convent. Any regrets? She asked the question casually, but Nathan knew she meant it seriously. Every day. Fort Collins will never leave me. The men I killed defending this place, they don't leave either. The weight's permanent. But this, he gestured to the valley before them. Ezra's house visible, half a mile south, smoke rising from the chimney where Sarah was making dinner for their children. Samuel's house to the east. Grace's medical clinic in town. The church steeple rising against the mountains. This balances it, not erases it, but balances it. And me, do you regret rescuing a failed nun? Nathan took her hand, small fingers wrapping around 2 of his. You weren't a failed nun. You were a woman brave enough to choose life over obedience. And I've never regretted a single moment. Ezra rode up with his oldest son, Nathan Jr., a boy of 7, who was already showing signs of inheriting the family size. The boy ran to his grandfather, climbed into his lap with the casual confidence of children who have never known anything but love. Grandpa, Papa says you built this whole town. Is that true? No, I built 1 cabin, other people built the rest. But you started it. I suppose I did. When I'm big, I want to build things too. Important things. Nathan looked at his grandson, saw 4 generations of Blackwood compressed into 1 child, and felt something settle in his chest. The weight he had carried since Fort Collins did not disappear, would never disappear. But it shifted, redistributed, became bearable under the framework of family and legacy and lives that would continue after his ended. Then I'll teach you, Nathan said. Starting tomorrow, we'll build something together. The sun set over the mountains, painting the valley in shades of amber and gold. 3 generations of Blackwoods sat on the porch talking about plans and dreams and the future, while the town Nathan had accidentally founded settled into evening routines below. In 1920, Nathan Blackwood died peacefully in his sleep at age 68. Catherine found him in the morning, his massive hands folded on his chest, his face peaceful, in a way it had rarely been during life. They buried him on a hill overlooking the creek where he had first staked his claim 38 years earlier. Catherine insisted the grave face east toward Philadelphia, toward the past they had both run from, and the redemption they had built. The funeral drew over 300 people. Ezra gave the eulogy, his voice breaking only once. My father was a giant who learned to be gentle. He was a killer who learned to create. He was a man haunted by his past who chose to build a future anyway. He taught me that strength without mercy is tyranny, and that the truest legacy is measured not in acres or gold or cattle, but in lives touched and improved. Nathan Blackwood owned 160 acres when he died, but he built a town, and that town will stand long after all of us are dust. Catherine lived another 8 years, long enough to see Grace establish the territory's first hospital. Samuel become a territorial judge, and Nathan Jr. grow to 6'5" and take over the family ranch. long enough to know that what she and Nathan had built would endure. She was buried beside her husband in 1928, the graves marked with simple stones and a shared epitaph written by Grace. Two broken souls who built something whole. In 1950, Ezra Blackwood stood on the same porch his father had built in 1882, now weathered and beautiful with age. He was 66, gray-haired, watching his own grandchildren play in the yard where he had learned to walk. His youngest grandson, another Nathan, asked him the question children always asked. "Grandpa, tell me about the old days, when Grandpa Nathan was alive." Ezra settled into his chair, feeling the weight of years and stories and legacy. "Your great-grandfather came to Montana with nothing but guilt and determination. He was running from a massacre he could never undo. He married a nun who had broken her vows to survive, but instead of letting their broken past destroy them, they built. They built a cabin that became a home, a marriage that became a family, a claim that became a town, and they taught me the most important lesson I ever learned." "What lesson?" "That we don't get to choose what we've done, but we do get to choose what we do next. And if we choose to build instead of destroy, to create instead of take, to love instead of hate, then maybe the scales balance. Maybe redemption is possible. Maybe broken people can build something whole." The boy considered this with the seriousness children bring to important matters. Did Grandpa Nathan find redemption? Ezra looked out over the valley, at the town that bore his father's name, at the families who lived here because one man had claimed one piece of land and refused to abandon it, at the legacy that would outlast memory. "Yes," he said finally, "I think he did, and so did Grandma Catherine. She gave up heaven to build something holy on earth. And in the end, maybe that's the same thing." Blackwood, Montana exists to this day, population 4,200. The original Blackwood homestead is preserved as a state historical site, the cabin restored to its 1882 appearance. Tourists walk through rooms where Nathan and Catherine Blackwood built a life from nothing but desperation and determination. In the town cemetery on the hill overlooking Blackwood Creek, two graves stand side by side, large and small, giant and former bride of Christ, married strangers who became partners, who became legend. The stones are worn now, the names barely legible. But the town remembers, because some legacies endure not in stone or metal or paper, but in the lives that follow. In the children who learn from parents who learn from parents who learn that size does not matter, that past does not define future, that sacred vows can be broken for sacred purposes, and that two broken people can build something whole if they are willing to try. Nathan Blackwood built a cabin in 1882. Catherine O'Brien broke her vows in 1882. But what they really built was hope. And hope, unlike wood or stone or even mountains, never weathers, never fades, never dies.